It's time for another WrestlePlanet news update, as an Attitude Era star discusses his cancelled AEW appearance, CM Punk's AEW Dynamite debut was a ratings hit, and is Bray Wyatt heading to Impact Wrestling? All that and more coming up in today's video, but first... Tonight, AEW will present their third ever episode of AEW Rampage, with this being the first time that the show has been pre-recorded ahead of time. Whilst there are spoilers out there, I'm not going to be sharing them with you today in case we get striked, but let's take a look at the card for tonight's show, which was filmed this past Wednesday after AEW Dynamite in Milwaukee. Dark Order associate Tay Conti will go one-on-one with the Bunny of the Hardy brand in Women's Division singles action. The Elite's Kenny Omega and Brandon Cutler will team up against Impact World Champion Christian Cage and the Elite Hunter Frankie Kazarian ahead of Omega and Cage's AEW World title match next weekend at All Out. And the finals of the AEW Tag Team Eliminator Tournament will take place as Jurassic Express will battle the Lucha Brothers. The winner of this will face AEW Tag Team Champions the Young Bucks at AEW All Out inside a steel cage. AEW President Tony Khan appeared on Le Batard and Friends podcast this week and discussed the recent signing of CM Punk. You may not have heard, but CM Punk debuted last Friday at AEW Rampage The First Dance, breaking AEW's attendance record on the rumor alone. Khan discussed some more metrics which shows the success of the signing, and he said, "It was number one in so many metrics. We set our attendance record for the most fans we've ever had at the United Center on Friday for AEW Rampage. We broke every social metric. I heard from ESPN that the traffic they got was so far beyond anything that anyone had anticipated. It was in fact the most traffic on any one social post they've had since May, which includes the Summer Olympics and NBA Finals. So the amount of interest for CM Punk returning to wrestling and joining AEW is unprecedented in the world of wrestling and this year in the world of sports." Khan was then asked if Punk's signing has already paid for itself, to which he responded, "I mean, I do think so. In terms of what this has done for our business, I really believe that. As soon as we saw the results from this, before we even got started, I knew this was the best deal we could have possibly done." Khan added that the debut has boosted AEW across the board, from ticket sales to merchandise, and as we'll see later in the video, CM Punk has affected the television ratings too. On the same podcast, Khan discussed the influence that WWE Chairman Vince McMahon has had on him, somebody he described as an idol in the past. Khan was asked if he feels McMahon still cares about his own product, and he replied, "He does care. I read a lot of books about Vince. I've never met Vince. There was a time when he was building his company in the 80s. I've tried to undertake a similar amount of work in terms of shouldering a ton of responsibility and taking a ton of one-on-one meetings." You hear about Vince going to convince Hulk Hogan, going to convince individual people to come in and work for the WWF, convincing a sponsor to come on. Vince was taking all these meetings and all this responsibility, and he was a similar age to me, and I think I'm inspired by that. Khan went on to discuss the differences between himself and McMahon and added, "I'm trying to do it a different way, and I'm not trying to run all the other wrestling companies out of business. I'm not trying to take out every regional wrestling company and eat their lunch and put them out of business. I don't think that makes sense." He took a very different approach and it worked for him really well, but he was all over the place and took a ton of meetings and made lots of deals. And I've tried to do that over the past 3 years. Whilst Vince isn't exactly the most popular figure amongst the AEW audience, and that's putting it lightly, there is a level of respect from the AEW president towards him. We may cover more of this interview in future videos as it's interesting stuff, but for now let's move on to some cancelled AEW plans. One of my favourite acts from the Attitude Era was The Brood, which originally consisted of their leader Gangrel, who was joined by Edge and Christian before their big break. The vampires would rise from the ground through a ring of fire in what is the coolest wrestling entrance of all time. Recently, SmackDown star Edge has reintroduced elements of the Brood gimmick during his feud with Seth Rollins, bringing back the infamous bloodbath as well as using the fire entrance before their match at SummerSlam. It has now been revealed that this booking has changed some plans in AEW, as they were set to involve Gangrel in the feud between Christian Cage and Kenny Omega. Gangrel spoke on his Fangin' and Bangin' podcast, revealing that AEW decided to go in a different direction and said, Yesterday I get a return phone call saying, "Oh man, we're so sorry, we're going in a different direction because WWE media stuff." That entrance, everything Edge did was great. The reason I wasn't so excited about it is because I knew I was offered another great opportunity and the timing sucked. AEW contacted me and they wanted me to come in and do Dynamite today, tomorrow, Wednesday night. They were putting the entrance together, they were going to do the fire, they were putting the music together, they were getting it all together. Unfortunately, these plans were ended as to not appear to be copying WWE, which means he will no longer be appearing. Gangrel then revealed a phone call with Edge where he revealed the news and added, he was like, "Hey man, did you see it? I was getting ready to call you. Man, I'm so happy and honored to pay tribute. You worked so hard and the Brood was a cool time in my life. I hope this helps you get more money out of bookings and move some merch." I let him go and he was so happy, I didn't know what to say. Then I go, "Yeah, it kinda cost me some work." He goes, "What do you mean, buddy?" I go, "Well, the other company over there, AEW, they were getting ready to do a thing. Whether it was a one-off or a two-off, I was getting ready to do my entrance again. I was going to get through the fire, not Edge, me, but I didn't tell him that." This would have been the second AEW appearance for Gangrel, who showed up in the Elite Deletion match between Sammy Guevara and Matt Hardy. It's a shame that his appearance in AEW was cancelled, but hopefully he can make some kind of appearance later down the line. This past Wednesday, AEW Dynamite aired live from Milwaukee, Wisconsin and featured the Dynamite debut of CM Punk. The show received a huge boost in viewership, becoming the third most watched Dynamite in show history and the second most this year. The show was up 20.21% from last week, drawing 1.172 million viewers compared to last week's 975,000. The only two shows to rank higher were the debut episode of Dynamite in October 2019, as well as the first Dynamite following NXT's move to Tuesdays in April. In terms of the key demo, the show drew the second highest in show history, second only to the first ever episode of Dynamite. AEW scored a 0.48, which equals roughly 620,000 viewers between the ages of 18 and 49, the all-important demographic. This is up 38.7% from last week's 0.35 rating. It seems that the CM Punk debut in AEW has drew the interest of younger viewers, which is a big plus for advertisers wanting to feature on AEW television. The goal is now for AEW to keep these numbers consistent whilst trying to stay above the 1 million mark, a line they dropped below for the last 2 weeks. Perhaps in hindsight, AEW should have stacked the card a little bit more to create some more excitement for the next episode, but we are on the brink of a Bryan Danielson debut, which should help give them yet another boost. Next week, AEW present the go-home edition of Dynamite before the all-out pay-per-view, where hopefully we get some kind of physicality involving CM Punk as he heads towards his match with Darby Allin, perhaps with the two fighting off two heels before going face-to-face. And quickly, just before we continue, make sure you drop a like on the video as it helps me out a lot, and make sure you subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss any upcoming wrestling content as we head, hopefully, towards 100,000 subscribers. But now, let's press play on the video. And before we get to our final story, let's get to a quick update regarding Brock Lesnar's return to WWE. Lesnar showed up at the end of the SummerSlam pay-per-view to confront still WWE Universal Champion Roman Reigns after his victory over John Cena. Fightful Select are now reporting that Lesnar's contract is roughly 1.5 years long and will see him through to early 2023, possibly into WrestleMania 39. The deal is said to be for 8 matches, with terms open for negotiations in the future. Lesnar is said to be working as a babyface on the SmackDown brand and is being teased for an appearance on tonight's show. He is still listed as a Raw superstar on WWE.com, but this is expected to be updated in the coming days. And finally, it seems that the Bray Wyatt story may not be as straightforward as we first thought, with individuals in All Elite Wrestling expecting him to sign when his non-compete clause ends. Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer has reported on Wrestling Observer Radio that higher-ups in the company are confident that he will join AEW as soon as he's able to, the same confidence that was felt when Aleister Black was released from WWE, who of course eventually showed up at AEW Dynamite Road Rager. In an update from Meltzer, officials within Impact Wrestling are quote really after Wyatt and want him to sign for them instead. There is still no word on the intentions of Wyatt or whether he has interest in either AEW or Impact. We do know that his 90-day non-compete clause ends on October 29th following his release earlier this year, which is just in time for Halloween and 1 week away from AEW's Full Gear pay-per-view. If I had to guess, I'd assume he'd prefer to work for AEW due to their larger television audiences, live crowds, and it just being overall a bigger deal. Impact Wrestling is filmed inside a small studio, and I think they're just too small time for somebody of Wyatt's star power, but who knows, perhaps they'll make him an offer that he can't refuse. And before you go, make sure you check out my video where I discuss the 10 hottest free agents in wrestling today.